Henry Miller once said, "One can be absolutely truthful and sincere, even though admittedly the most outrageous liar. Fiction and invention are the very fabric of life." This dichotomy is present in some of television's most compelling leading men of the 21st century, providing dramatic tension that allows the truth of the human condition to be explored in a life built on a foundation of falsehoods and fabrications. But what might that life look like through the lens of a 22-minute comedy, where the stakes couldn't be raised from week to week, and the character was relegated to the C stories to tell their tallest tales? This is the life of a simple man with a past that's equal parts fascinating and fictitious, a man who thrives on chaos, control, and occasionally cleaning. Surrounded by coworkers with name badges that say who they are and what they do, this man wore a uniform that expressed both with two simple words: the janitor. Although the medical staff at Sacred Heart were diagnostic experts, the janitor managed to keep everyone in the dark as a deliberate mystery with flashes of humanity beneath the facade. In the back half of Scrubs' run, the show's universe had caught up to the janitor's unique brand of crazy in a way that led to some of the most fantastical and least believable elements of the series. Despite this, by the show's official finale in 2009, he was a married man and accepted by his peers, but now found himself powerless to control the world around him as it continued to change, while he grappled with stability for the first time in his life. Today on the Flanderization Files, we'll take a closer look at the janitor as we ask some important questions. Questions like, was the janitor Flanderized? Was the Flaniter janderized? Am I having a stroke? Perhaps most importantly, we'll try to answer this. Is it possible that the janitor remained consistent while the world itself Flanderized around him? To get to the bottom of this, I'd like to officially call this meeting of the Brain Trust to order. All right, welcome everyone to the Flanderization Files for another week. I am Will, and I will let everybody introduce themselves alphabetically by order of first name, starting with Ben.
Hey everybody, my name is Ben. I just have a quick gripe with the end of that intro.
Go ahead.
You called us the Brain Trust. You can hardly call the four of us the Brain Trust.
Well, yeah, but same is to be said of Scrubs. It's kind of the whole thing. It's thematic.
Okay, fair enough. We'll pass it then to Dakota, because that's how the alphabet
There you
works.
go, Brain Trust.
Hi, yes, I'm Dakota. I just noticed in that video, was it the Timmy Turner picture that was low res, or is it...
This won't make sense to you guys. I'm telling Sally that I'll have a full one for you guys to watch when we actually upload this. 50-50 shot, I won't. All right, over to Model T.
Yeah, so my name is Model T, or you can also call me Tyler, aka Tylicious.
Of Licious Media Company.
Of Licious Media Company. I'm Tyler because I'm Tyler and I'm delicious. I'm not promiscuous. I'm Tylicious.
I gave you too much rope. That's on me. I'll give you a better segue and we'll talk about all the various names you just introduced yourself with, because today we are talking about the janitor from Scrubs. And I do think a lot of ground has been covered about him online as just one of those Reddit type figures where, like, Neil Flynn as the actor gets so much credit where they're like, oh, he just gets lines written in the script of Neil Flynn gets to be funny. I'm not really here to mythologize him. We all know that the performance is great. I'm here to talk about all the mystery and mythology behind the character of the janitor, starting with all of his aliases. So just to jump right into the first episode, which I believe is My Friend the Doctor, I'm going to say season 3, episode 8, and I nailed it. By the way, just going into this, it's important to disclose I have done shockingly little research going into this episode. This is, anybody who knows me knows this is one of my all-time favorite shows. I grew up with it and latched onto it and never exactly let go of it. In 7th grade, I was in a journalism class. This is absolutely true. And I wrote a newspaper column where I wrote about TV every week. So one week I wrote about the Scrubs series finale. And the next week, by my friend / the editor's request, I wrote about Castle. So I was really just tapping right into the middle school market. You guys watch Castle growing up?
Hardly. I mean,
Never.
a lot of the first 5 minutes.
Ahab.
It was kind of like the recording runoff of Desperate Housewives. When I recorded it on DVR, then I get the first 5 minutes of Castle for some reason, and I'm like, "Yep,
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Don't
delete
date
this."
yourself right there, Mister DVR
I was going
man.
to say your DVR might have been assuming gender roles about you in the late 2000s and being like, whoa, 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 Desperate Housewives. Are you sure you didn't mean to record Castle? Here's the first few minutes. Check your time settings. This could be you.
TiVo thinks you're gay.
All right, every time. It's like, does your girlfriend want to meet
No, TiVo.
TiVo too? Like, what's next?
uh,
Does your girlfriend want to make TiVo go?
TiVo is what Tyler called Terrell Owens when he came to buy weed from him.
All right.
We may
Another
not have TiVo for your girlfriend, but I do have a DVD player, if that helps.
whom helps whom to do what? I'm gonna make a segue out of this if it fucking kills me. So much like the DVD logo bouncing from corner to corner, so do the conversations as we wrap back into the mystery of the janitor. Speaking of all his fake names and the aliases, Tyler, aka Tylicious, for 500 fake dollars, can you give me 3 fake names that the janitor has used during Scrubs?
I know he's Klaus, the German.
That's the same person. That's one.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant. I also know he also played a whole bunch of different.
Yep. So there are 3 in this. There are 3 or 4, 5 in this episode alone, but there's a handful throughout the series. I'll accept any.
Okay, so if that's the case, there was Klaus. There was oh my gosh.
Pass it.
No passing.
Pass it to me.
No, I got this. We saw so many too. Can I phone a friend? Just give me like
Yeah, you have to actually call him though.
Okay. My phone's dead.
Oh, can't phone a friend. Sorry. I'm so glad I made that bullshit stipulation. You're on your own, kid.
Oh no. Okay.
All right, timer runs out in 5, 4, 3, 2.
There's a British butler. No. Yeah.
All right. First one to buzz in with their name gets to guess next.
Ben?
There you go. I'm going to defer to.
Okay. One of my favorites, I don't remember the episode, but this always stuck with me, was Captain Belly Stinkwater.
Wait, what?
That's a real name he used.
I cannot believe I don't remember this.
And then there was like back-to-back had Sir Mops-a-Lot and Sir Plunge-a-Lot. Lurch, Sasquatch.
Yeah. Lurch is a good one. I was thinking of actual True Blue aliases rather than nicknames, but I like where you're going. Sally, what you got?
I did write them down, so I cheated a little bit on the notes. But the other 2 personalities that were not mentioned were Nigel the Brit and Ephraim, the simple, good-natured stutterer.
And yet, there was one crucial character from that episode that you all failed to disclose, and that is an actor named Neil Flynn, who appeared in the film The Fugitive. So that is the crux of this episode, is JD and the janitor. It's established up to this point. I thought going into this when I made this list that all of us had seen Scrubs. Dakota had not, so I did have to pivot a little bit here. But the basic understanding is that the janitor hates JD and plays constant mind games with him to just fuck up his day a little bit, as do we all. So with this episode, kind of just jumping in with that established dynamic, this is where it finally gets like its own story rather than just a runner in the background of what's going on in JD's life. So now we get to see the janitor hooking his claws into JD's brain and like permeating his relationships to the point where he thinks he's hallucinating, seeing him on screen as the fugitive, or not as the fugitive, but as the subway cop or whatever in The Fugitive. And it's just really interesting to see that play out and then kind of break the reality of the series at the end when we find out that it is in fact Neil Flynn. And so it just adds an extra layer of mind fuckery as we discover that he himself is now this janitor. So a lot to unpack with that one. But actually, the reason I asked for fake names is because there are several in this series for him. Ben had a couple great ones with Lurch. What was the other one?
Captain Billy Stinkwater episode is called My Screw Up. If you want to watch the episode where we first get introduced to him as Captain Billy Stinkwater, you can look, you can find it.
All right,
there.
that's in the bonus episodes. That'll be on the Patreon list with the rest of these. Is season 3, episode 14. There's one I love where I think he's holding like a fake medical conference or something. He writes his name on the board as Dr. Jan Etor. That one gets me. And then a really interesting thing I found today, and I'll give it to Sally to put in the show notes, is as I was looking around for just a name tag to use in the intro, spoilers for this series finale of Scrubs, he tells JD allegedly his real name, which is Glenn Matthews. And on like some bullshit eBay site, they have like fan badges for all the Scrubs characters that are probably fake. They only accept money via PayPal. If that's real, you go, girl. But I have my doubts based on everything I read. But they have just the janitor, and that's what I wanted, was just a screen cap of the janitor to really underscore my point. But they just wrote Glenn Matthews on it, and I was like, that's kind of like nobody's gonna get that at a Halloween party. Sally, I wanna cut to you first on this because, like I said, you're coming into this relatively cold. What were your thoughts diving into season 3, episode 8, as your kind of entry point to the janitor relationship that we're talking about today?
Definitely. So I kind of had a little pre-show by watching the pilot to see all these characters at the beginning and how they establish how they're setting up for the rest of the series. So in the pilot, you kind of see JD and the janitor interact a little bit. There was something about a penny stuck in a door, and the janitor kept blaming JD for it. But I think it ended up being JD's problem. And I'm like, okay, so this is probably what the relationship is. It's really threatening towards each other. But for this one, I thought it was a good episode to establish a little bit more of that relationship between them. They kind of give each other a little wink and nod, and they have this whole secret now of Neil Flynn, well, the janitor, being in The Fugitive, which I actually paused the episode to make sure that he was in The Fugitive because I just watched that movie like 2 months ago for the first time, weirdly enough. When they have that secret, I'm like, okay, maybe this is something a little bit more than just them going back and forth fighting with each other. Maybe this could grow into something of a friendship between the two of them. So I thought it was a really interesting choice.
I'm glad to hear
Yeah,
it.
if I could, I want to play off what you were saying there at the end, Dakota. Like they were like kind of like best friends, or like, well, not best friends, but they were like friendly, becoming friends. Um, that like so in doing research, I didn't know this, but I had like kind of heard wind about this before, that like the janitor character was initially not really supposed to be a character that continued forward in season 1. He was in every episode of season 1, but the idea behind the janitor initially was that he was going to kind of be a character that was a figment of JD's imagination, like he wasn't actually real. And so like he was supposed to be something like in the first season, he's the only one that ever interacts with the janitor, so he's kind of his imaginary friend. And then throughout the rest of the seasons, basically Neil Flynn was like, I think I want to interact with other characters, and they were like, okay. So that he starts interacting with more people, and we now find out he's a real person.
Yeah, and I think
But
based on which Bill Lawrence interview you read, the story can change from, oh, he was going to be a figment, but only for like the first 13 episodes. And then if we got canceled, that was going to be like the big reveal. Or, well, then Neil Flynn wanted to interact with others and I had no reason to say no. Or we painted ourselves into a corner and then realized that we didn't actually want to do that. So we did. So I don't know. The story can change. But yeah, to your point, Ben, that's pretty much exactly it. Was for the first half, at least of the first season. There are like 2 points of contention where I think he like snarls at a nurse or something, and like I think he's chasing Laverne with the vacuum at one point.
I think this was a good episode to start off to like show their relationship, and I do think I am intrigued to see what your like. I think I understand what your take is on the janitor, because this episode is like so like it mythologizes him so quickly from the beginning. And so I'm intrigued to see what your arc's going to look like, because I like this episode. I think he's fun, and it shows like how he's like a character who's kind of very unique in any sort of TV show where he's like fully breaking like every wall possible.
Yeah, going in, I had no idea what your take was going to be on the Janitor, where the Flanderization was going to fall under. Say the reason why you picked this is, one, in your intro you talked about how he goes from a mythical character that bends the rules and changes time at will of however he wants to, and he basically makes them dance like his little puppets.
Did I send you
And in
that
this
version of the intro?
episode,
Did I
what?
send you a different version of the intro?
N- that's what it showed to me on my
Okay,
end.
okay.
I don't know what y'all got, but I got a dark HBO version. So,
The Custodian.
I'm just kidding.
I will say I had a slightly different trajectory in mind, still a similar angle, but it kind of morphed over time, not unlike Scrubs, which started out and kind of throughout its run telling like deeply human stories, but most of the zany fantasy elements were just that. They were fantasy, they were relegated strictly to JD's imagination, and then how he saw the world was kind of, as the audience surrogate, how we got to see it through his eyes. But then over time, and I think season 3 is where it starts a little bit. I still love that season. Season 4 is where I start to get a little shaky with it. It just gets increasingly cartoonish in universe. And over time, it starts to kind of catch up to the Janitor to the point where he's still being exaggerated. But because the show is being exaggerated even further and even quicker, it starts to catch up with him a little bit. But I wanted to start with this episode because for this one and the season 4 episode we're going to talk about, there is a parallel track I could have run with 2 different episodes. One that I didn't include on the bonus episodes was a season 3 one called My Moment of Untruth. I thought that was a really good one, but again, I think to illustrate this as a starting point, I think the one I picked was probably the way to go with it.
Another reason I think you might have picked this episode, but maybe it's not necessarily on the trajectory that we're talking about, is maybe we're already seeing his path to Flanderization by just immediately breaking the fourth wall with Neil Flynn's character by having his actual performance in The Fugitive represented into the show, and we're like, okay, maybe this character is just not based in real life already. But yeah, like talking about JD's imagination, that makes a lot of sense comparatively to something like How I Met Your Mother, which is told through fantasy. So
Potentially.
Yeah. Well, and it's like I think my current theory, and this we'll see. I'm intrigued to see what you actually say your theory for Flanderization is, but like this is a good way to start the path towards Flanderization, where his teasing and making fun of JD is the joke. Like I think this is a good episode where it shows they're friendly, but they're not like competitive, but they get more competitive throughout the show, and it kind of becomes just that all the time. So that's my current running theory, and I'll see if it changes based off what you say in the next episodes.
I like
But
it.
yeah, that's why I think this episode's a good jumper.
I like it. And speaking of the next episodes and jumping, we are going to jump to season 4, episode 13, My Ocardial Infarction. Jesus, that one, of all the episodes, that's like the most of a fucking mouthful. Every time I see it when I'm watching on streaming or whatever, I always convince myself it says something different. So in this one, this is a classic Janitor C plot where he has an ongoing crush on Elliot, invites her, or rather invites himself to get coffee with her. She shows up after JD says that, he believes the Janitor thinks it's going to be a date. And she shows up, he's in a full suit. She gets freaked out and leaves. And in a moment of panic, he tries to explain to her that he was wearing a full suit because he was rehearsing with his a cappella group, and says that they are the best a cappella group in the hospital, at which point Ted and the rest of the worthless peons take notice. And I forgot how hard of a cut it was from that. They cut back to the A plot for a while. And then I forgot that by the time we cut back to them, they had already established that there was going to be some sort of contest between them. They were all ready to go, and it was already at the contest. I, for some reason, thought there was a little more of an interstitial, like connecting those 2 points, but instead it's like a direct challenge, and then we're at the contest, which is funny. They pull Barbara Ann out of their ass, phrasing, and they win on a whim, and it's very fun. There was a different season 4 episode involving the Janitor and Elliot where he has a bet with Dr. Cox where he believes he can take her on a date. Dr. Cox thinks he can't. There's trickery involved. Eventually, Janitor loses the bet, and as a result, Dr. Cox gets to smash the janitor's van into a wall. So another fun one, but I picked this one even though it lacks that little bit of extra substance and it is a C plot. There's just something about that acapella scene that when we're talking about moments that really humanize the janitor, like I really think that's something that just it's so sweet and so fun and so stupid that I always get a kick out of it. All right, we're gonna just talk about this individually, and to kick this off, I'm gonna pass things over to Captain Belly Stinkwater.
Thank
Should
you.
we?
Please always call me by my official
And I
military
was gonna
name.
ask, speaking of things we should always do when we call upon you, are we to stand when we address you, or when you address us? How is that? Because I have to keep framing myself.
Yeah, no, it's a 3 finger salute when you greet me, and it's a full on.
All right, I have to go back to the acapella band for a second, where again they sang "Barbara Ann" by the Beach Boys. Now I am gonna once again mix Scrubs episodes because there's this episode with the acapella group. There's plenty with Ted's acapella group, the Worthless Peons, but there's a separate episode where Turk joins the Janitor's air band, and that's where he dances to Belle Biv DeVoe's "Poison." That's where the Fortnite dance comes from. To get all the youths listening to this show, I said Fortnite, Fortnite, Fortnite. That'll rope them in. Anyway, that's all just to tie back to the fact that men can have fun singing the Beach Boys together, even if it's pretend. And I think it humanizes us all. And maybe subconsciously, that's why I picked this episode, is because much like doing this show, it's all about connecting with friends and finding the fun in that connection. What did you guys think?
Ow! So anyway, uh, the episode I thought was really fun. I also loved the side plot of the blood sugar lottery that Turk was betting into. So that was a fun side plot, or I guess main plot. But yeah, I thought this one was an interesting choice given the fact that it with the way that I was viewing your Flanderization as kind of him becoming Flanderized, as always the joke being bugging JD. I didn't see that as much in this episode, so it kind of took me off compared to the rest of the episodes. I do think it was an interesting episode because it really shows him this is like one episode where he actually has levels. Like he seems genuinely disappointed when he doesn't get to date her. And so I don't know. Like normally, you would think that he doesn't show a lot of emotion throughout the show, apart from just like the ups and downs of these weird characters he plays. But like this seemed very personal, which I was just surprised by because we don't usually get a lot of like personal touches of the janitor. For me, was a bit of a from what I am anticipating your Flanderization to be. I thought it was a step backward compared to the other episode, but maybe you're going a different direction that I didn't see.
So I'm kind of thinking differently about this episode now that you guys have explained it a little bit more, because I didn't really find it to be humanizing the janitor at first. I thought it was just kind of more of a way to embarrass him entirely. Like doesn't get the date with Elliot, but also I don't think that was the purpose either, was for him to win over Elliot, because that's not what they set up or established in the beginning. And now that I'm kind of like trying to figure this out in my mind, I think him being confident about the song and having a group effort together and showing his disappointment at first, but then once the song actually ends up being good, there's some gleaming hope for him.
I guess I have a question, Will. What was the Flanderization you would say in this episode? Like why this?
That's a great question. What do you think?
Damn you!
I've gotten
Okay,
narc
well,
myself,
so
man.
Will would be everybody's least favorite science teacher.
I was gonna say Sally would be everybody's some people's favorite or least favorite English teacher, just because he's approaching these episodes in a sense that I've never even thought to examine them through a different lens of sorts. That being said, some of it baffles me, and even to a point, I would say frustrates me across the few episodes we've done so far, just because we have such different trains of thought on things. So sometimes I feel like if you gave me an assignment, I'd read the book, but I'd be mad about the follow through. So yeah,
Can I give it your
Tyler, I'm
opinion?
not going to answer your
So
question. I want your opinion because not unlike the whole episode, I have an arc here. I'm going to talk about what I think it is as I go
and so
through.
that's why I was just curious where this was falling in the arc. Because like I want to make sure maybe hopefully my idea of what your arc is building up to the same
I'd love
idea.
to hear it.
Um, I mean, in the very first few seasons, he was a man of action, didn't care about what other people thought of him or anything, and he loved to manipulate and kind of mess around with JD. That was the shtick, right? And as the seasons go on, it definitely seems like that whole the the smoke and mirrors that he would play and the different characters slowly either, I don't know if you're saying amplified more or almost kind of turned him. You see a lot more of, you could call it humanization, or maybe just not following through. You know what I mean? Like it goes from like I'm a crazy character to then like, oh, I'm actually secretly not, and I'm really really terrified of all these things. And yeah, I used to do all these crazy things, but secretly we're like now I'm not anymore. Like it seemed like that's what the episodes you showed us. That's what starts going downhill. But maybe I'm wrong. And so that's why I couldn't tell you. Um, it's so hard to it's so hard for me to. There are so many great episodes with him, and the one thing that I hate about the character is because it's such a great character, and the in such limited time too. He's only on screen for maybe 4 to 6 minutes, if eight, if lucky on a good day, right? Unless he has a plot B storyline, he's never really in there all that much. But the amount of time he's in there, that force, the drive that he throws, that just pushes the whole story itself is
I'm
astounding.
very glad
One of my
you
favorite
I'm glad
characters
you
as well
said
too.
that in that fashion because that's actually the other reason I picked this over the other season 4 episode regarding him and Elliot is because I really wanted to show that power that he has to carry a C story because it's not just the title of my orcardial infarction. God, I hope I'm saying that right. That turns me off to it. It's just, again, not one of my favorite episodes for JD and the JD Elliott relationship. It is a good episode for her, but I wouldn't necessarily go back to it as often as I did were it not for that Janitor C story. And it's not even a B plot. He's got some great B plots, but those, like you said, like 4 minutes combined make up for the other 18 that I'm kind of about, you know?
Mhm.
You also said a phrase you used that I took note of was the janitor's smoke and mirrors. And I appreciate that
Yeah.
as well because it's a perfect segue into our next episode, Season 5, Episode 6, My Misperception. This is the introduction of a recurring character, Mrs. Wilk, played by Michael or Michelle Learned. I don't know how to say her name. She's from Little House on the Prairie, I believe. Very great actress. This is, I believe, her first episode where JD has to confront her with the news of a potentially terminal illness and misreads her cue of wanting to be as comfortable as possible as saying that she was ready to die when in fact she was not. And there was all sorts of mix ups and life ending filled shenanigans going on there. But in the background, Carla is trying to get a hospital picture organized with the entire staff. You can see throughout the years it has been increasingly or decreasingly rather just getting down to her, Laverne, and Todd in classic banana hammock Todd fashion. So she organizes a picture, and the janitor, ever the naysayer and a man of the people as he likes to fashion himself, tells Carla that with all his social knowledge, this picture's not going to happen. He knows it. Sure enough, she gets everybody involved, but crucially does not involve the janitor, and he uses a mirror to refract the light from the sun, or I I am a bad science teacher because I don't know science. I don't think I used refract correctly. Either way, shocks the lens, picture's white out. Uh, Carla confronts him about it and then realizes that he wanted to be included, and that flusters him as she calls him on his shit a little bit as to why he ruined the picture for everybody else. And then by the end, he proves his status as a man of the people by getting everybody organized and actually getting her that staff photo. One thing that I did not notice until I watched this episode for this podcast is it's clear that they actually were only able to get everybody together for that shot on the same day, because I looked really closely. I remembered the janitor was wearing a suit in the picture at the end. So I saw really quickly right before they took the picture, there's a guy standing next to Carla, a tall guy in a suit, and I realized that it's just a stand-in for the janitor. So we're supposed to believe the first time they take the picture, this is just some random hospital guy who's in a business suit standing next to Carla, very tall with no credentials, just so that at the end they clearly just swapped him out with Neil Flynn and then had that as the composite group shot, which I thought was very, very funny. So yeah, another episode where I will try to be, I'm just such a shithead with this. I just want to hear what you guys think of what this is building up to so far. Like, I want to hear your thoughts on how this ties into the other episodes, what you thought of the janitor and Carla's relationship, because unfortunately, most of that was saved for the bonus episodes this time around. But of all the side pairings, the janitor and Carla is one of my favorite pair ups when they do happen. So I wanted to see what you guys thought now that we do get to bring that into the fold a little bit here.
So I think what this episode is building up to is, again, I think it's back to what I was saying prior, is in the old seasons the janitor didn't care. Like, if he did anything, it was to mess with JD for fun, for entertainment. It was like, it wasn't anything of a need or a want. But and Carla and the janitor's relationship has always been on a mutual, respectful, like they're both on the same page, respecting wise. Um, but this just seemed kind of like a left field of, like, just a pity sad man that didn't get his way and upset, and is now becoming like a child in such of a way. And again, no longer being like this, I do whatever I want, but is again following that manipulative that one line, manipulative line, and following the path and habitual habits that he has, of his character. But at the same time, is now it's almost like it's the, oh, I want to be included, oh, woe is me, I'm also want to be seen as a person. And I don't know if you would call that almost character growth or writing of, okay, well, this guy is no longer like just uh a heartless monster that's a janitor at a hospital, but actually someone that is just wants to be a normal person too. And maybe that is the Flanderization of taking this crazy wild character that we loved and knew, and just kind of, I don't know, muddling it down to an everyman.
Yeah. I notice a lot of, at least the first three episodes that we've been talking about, is that a lot of these characters somehow find a way to put the janitor back in his place. And he acknowledges that, he is, like the last episode, he mentions that he was the classic janitor and he slams his head on the table, all that kind of stuff. But for this one, I thought that there was good motives for him to have character growth, and I just don't know with the very last shot what it means for him to ruin the picture entirely. So, I mean, yeah.
Could you elaborate on that a bit?
So I'm not I'm not sure if it was just a complete switch up for him to go back into a sense of Flanderization by not being a part of the picture and just ruining it anyways. I'm trying to see the case of manipulation within what he built up with Carla, because he gives her what seems like a very genuine end to the relationship by giving her a hug and saying, "I'm so glad I'm a part of this." But it can also be like a joke thing, like he's just doing it because he is a part of the crew, but he still wants to prank around and mess with them in some way or shape or form, because that's just who he is, I guess.
I loved, of course, the photo bit. My favorite bit in this is him putting the little tiny wheels on Dr.
Yeah,
shoes.
I love the way he adapts it. I actually like this now.
I think this episode definitely goes towards that route of, like, they're trying to find a way to humanize him, but I just it keeps going down my track of him just becoming a nuisance for the sake of being a nuisance, and that nuisance is the only joke. Like, sure, like he has a reason at the end for being a nuisance about stopping the photo, but like you guys were saying, like, is that genuine that he actually cared and wanted to be a part of the photo, or is he just like, oh, like he needed to be like, he has a soft side for Carla, which is probably a good thing, honestly, in this episode. So I would say that I like the relationship because it kind of brings him back to reality in a way, and like it's the only time he shows that like remorse. But I think it does go down my track of that I've kind of thought you were going down, of him becoming this perpetual nuisance who his whole gag is to annoy others, and that's it.
Interesting. I really like what you guys are bringing to the table with this because I really did not consider any of these angles with it. I will say it's funny because he is such a nuisance in all of the things he does. But without tipping my hand too much, I do think.
Can I? Sorry, I
Oh,
don't mean
go
to
ahead.
cut you off. But so like what I love about these episodes, but it's also kind of crazy, is like we don't, when you give us these episodes lists, we don't know what we're getting
And
ourselves
that's the
into.
same for everybody who's
Like,
going to be following along on the Patreon. They're just going to get these 5 episodes, and we'll probably throw in the bonus ones as well if they do want to talk or watch those. We might not get to talk about those as much in depth, but yeah, so they're going to be having the same experience. And so that's kind of what I wanted to try with this rather than have a demonstration like you and Sally, and even Ben to an extent, of saying explicitly what I think it is, although I did kind of talk about it a little bit. I do see this episode in particular, the viewpoint I'm coming at it with is that it is genuine. I don't think he expected to be called out by Carla about not being included in the picture. You can see how visibly flustered he is, because I do think, as far as the rest of the hospital is concerned up to that point, it's Janitor causing chaos for the sake of causing chaos, just like everything you guys have clearly seen up to this point and everything you've been bringing to the table with this discussion. However, we do get to see that perspective of him, even though it's still a JD focused story. It's a my story. In this B plot, we still get Janitor having, I don't know why I call him Janitor instead of the Janitor. I don't know if that's more or less formal, but either way, we do see him actually appreciative, is how I read it at least. I do think he meant it about when Carl was like, I thought you were going to murder me, when he hugged her, and he's like, I resisted the urge. Like, I believe that.
yeah,
I do think that he is a psychopath at the end of the day. But I do think once she called him on it, that it is genuine. I don't think that he was messing with them. I do think that he ruined the photo and that's him causing chaos, but I think that's how everybody has always interpreted it. And maybe for more of the cases that we didn't know about, maybe there was a reason behind it.
mm-hmm. Well, and
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to go back to, because it was so, and all of our ideas do kind of link up to each other, where they could all be the same,
Mm-hmm.
where they could all be all true and agreeable. Because yeah, he was causing issues in the place anyway, but when he found out everyone was going to be doing the photo and he wasn't part of it, that could have been a lashing out, essentially, of, I'm upset because I'm not part of this photo, and that's why you have the ruining of the photo plus all the other little antics he was doing.
Yeah,
And then
absolutely.
when she calls him out, then he gets in the suit, and that's why what makes me think is like he genuinely, like, it means so much to him to be considered like a normal person, because he's never been the normal one before. And I think that's what you're getting to, Will. Yeah.
It's going to be a bit of a rug pull. I was a bit of a stinker with this one. But do we have more thoughts about my misperception before we move on to my number one doctor? So we are going to jump to season 7. We're skipping season 6 entirely, which also, if you're watching Scrubs for the first time, for the most part, I would also just recommend skipping most of season 6. I think that's when it starts to get really, really fantastical in the worst way. But we'll jump to season 7, episode 6, my number one doctor. The A plot of this concerns that darn internet, where they have a website and it turns into a competition to see who can get the highest patient rating as the number one doctor. It starts out as JD because he is caring to a fault for all of his patients, and then Dr. Cox and Turk have an allyship where they have the Todd come in and sabotage JD's rating. And meanwhile, the janitor, speaking of looking for that connection and finding those moments of humanity, he's actually in a relationship now. But the dilemma that he's facing is he has to figure out how to be himself, which we have established as this absolute psychopath, around his relatively normal girlfriend named Lady. And we get to see it kind of through Carla and Dr. Kelso's eyes as she follows him around and is discovering that he's pretending to be normal around her. And as she encourages him to be himself, he freaks her out at first and then learns that small doses are the key to this this relationship. And speaking of that squirrel collection you were talking about, Tyler, the taxidermy does come into play here a little bit as he's testing the waters to see what she will and will not accept. So that is my number one doctor in a nutshell. I do want to quickly talk. I know it's all about the janitor, but if we're talking about fun side pairings, Dr. Cox and Turk are always fun when they get together, but I really like the relationship that Carla and Kelso have, especially as Kelso leans back and gets less to be of a serious chief of medicine and more of a muffin hound. But yeah, that's why I want to talk about this one is actually the janitor lady relationship and figuring out how to reckon with him at this point in the series and how it factors into everything else. And I'm even going to, for the sake of time, we can talk about this episode individually if anybody has something super important they want to say about this specifically. But if not, I will even jump to episode 5 and kind of tie this all together. What do you think?
I'm good with that.
Yeah,
all right.
I'm good with that too.
So now we do have a bit of a time jump from season 7 all the way to the end of season 8, the penultimate episode, in fact, season 8, episode 17, My Chief Concern. So at this point, Turk, by the episode prior, had just been promoted to chief of surgery. JD, it's established that his son is living about 40 minutes away. He gets an apartment to be closer to his son, who he is sharing custody with Kim, played by Elizabeth Banks. So he meets her at her hospital, where she is also a doctor, hits it off with their chief of medicine, and at the beginning of this episode announces his departure from Sacred Heart to move to be closer to his son and take a job at the hospital nearby where his son's mother works. The janitor is grappling with everybody around him, whether it's Dr. Kelso coming out of retirement or Ted and Gooch moving in together, or his wife, because he and Lady have gotten married since we saw them last, as she is dealing with her sister and her child and those issues that lie within. And as he's trying to reckon with everything going on around him, he does have this moment where he's just trying to stop the change from going on. But much to his frustration, things continue to progress and snowball, and you can see that this world is moving on without the janitor in a way. But as we're talking about his relationship with Lady, we are seeing that he is still crazy, right? Like he is still a certifiably insane person. And that despite any semblance of normalcy, are we in agreement that that hasn't really changed?
No.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say we're
It's
not.
there. It's there.
Okay.
It's a little bit more unhinged now too. Like that was the thing. Is like in the beginning it was subtle. Like you knew he was crazy, but you're like, oh, he's just crazy because like he wants to be. But then like as the series goes on, you're like, oh no, he's just crazy.
Right. And so what I want to really look at here, and this is where the rug pull element comes in, is while they've humanized him in these episodes that I've picked, they haven't taken away his core sensibilities. He is still a pathological liar. He is still a certifiably insane person. I apologize if that's outdated terminology. I shouldn't be saying certifiably insane, but I use it hyperbolically in this case, of course. And just the different levels that come with everything wrapped up in that dude's head. But you see by this penultimate episode, he is sitting at a table with Dr. Cox and Jordan and his wife, and he is fully accepted by the people around him as this weird oddball that he is. 2 episodes prior, he had a mostly sham wedding in Hawaii in the Bahamas rather, that he didn't expect anybody to show up to. JD rallies the troops and they go to the janitor's wedding, and they have a real wedding in the Bahamas, and it's really touching. And it's just this great moment. But now that he's reached this level of acceptance among his peers and he's still saying all of this crazy stuff, I want to take a look back at the episodes that I picked other than the janitor plots. And really, if you look at most of the main characters, but especially JD and Dr. Cox and some of their worst, most Flanderizable traits, if you look at those characters and then you look at the janitor's path, I don't think the janitor was Flanderized. I think he stuck to a pretty key trajectory and they were able to develop him as a character. But even though they ramped up his crazy as time went on, the rest of the Scrubs universe matched that crazy. And as it caught up with him, he's allowed to be, to what Tyler was kind of saying, almost an everyman because he's so fucking crazy, but so is everything else. Yeah, season 8, when they moved to ABC, they did try to ground the series a little bit more, and you do have some really good core human story type of episodes. But at the same time, you can't really put that genie back in the bottle, if that's the correct expression. Like, they were putting JD in a backpack in season 5. Like, Turk was carrying JD in a backpack. They were playing Space Invader with giant water balloons from the roof of the hospital, throwing them on interns. There's no coming back from that. It's too much of a cartoon. Everybody is too crazy that the janitor, despite being ramped up throughout, is normal because of how far that window is shifted. So I don't think he was Flanderized. I think for the first instance on this show, the character we're talking about is not Flanderized definitively. And I would argue that in something I didn't necessarily anticipate, the entire series was Flanderized around it. And I know everything we've talked to up to this point about the definition of Flanderization is about one character in particular. But I think this universe is too fascinating and too all-encompassing when we're seeing something like the janitor and seeing how much it shifted. What do you guys think? Uh-oh.
That was me having the rug pulled out from under me.
Fuck you. Oh my god.
Okay, I don't think you're wrong. I can understand where you're coming from. I definitely was struggling to come up with like what my theory would be for what you were saying his Flanderization was. I think that you could pick a lot of other episodes throughout the show, or I don't know, just highlight different aspects of who he like is throughout the show to like find other angles of Flanderization. I will say, I think where I agree with you that the entire show was Flanderized to the point of being unbelievable. Yes, he becomes more human by the end, and so he doesn't seem as Flanderized as the rest. I do think he's Flanderized along with them, though, because he basically just gets Flanderized at a slower rate. Like, or rather, we're introduced to that insanity so early that it's just normal. But at the end of the day, it's still the same insanity. It's just at the same level as everybody else.
But that's what I would say, though.
And
It's the same insanity. That's why I would say it's hard to argue for the
Yeah.
janitor's Flanderization
because it
specifically.
doesn't keep going up and it doesn't die down. It's just always consistent.
And I would even say
like,
there's an argument to be made that it does go up. That is the reason I put My Saving Grace season 8 episode 3 as a bonus episode, is just for the scene and the post-credit scene where he's with Dr. Cox breaking into the office and he's like, I thought you'd be cooler about this, because the janitor's like freaking out. He's like, no, this is boring stuff for me. This is rookie level. So I had to create this persona who's scared about going back to jail. Like, that's the level he's operating at in season 8. But I could also see him operating at that level in season 2. But it's hard to say. It's almost, I hate to use climate change as a metaphor, but I'm picturing this rock that was always on a beach when I was a kid growing up. And it always was like, it felt so far out in the water. And then over time, it just got closer and closer to shore, and it just started bumming me out. And I feel like that's a similar experience with Scrubs, where the rock doesn't change. It's just the tides around you where it really makes you notice how different things are.
So, and that's like, and I really, really, really love the squirrels and the taxidermy as just like a great point. Because early that came out early on in the series, if I'm correct. About like, was that in the first season?
I'm not sure if it was first season. I do think it was fairly early on.
It was like the first or second season that the squirrels were, because like I remember that scene so vividly of him and all his army of squirrels, and he was having coffee with them, and you were like, this dude's fucking nuts. And he was like, isn't that right, Mr. Tillman? You know, like he was talking to himself through the squirrels. So like you knew from the beginning this guy was like a little unhinged and nuts. But as the seasons went on, it's almost like the social awareness of himself also progressed, where he was like, I know I'm crazy. And instead of was like, no, this is like just who I am. He even admits, I'm crazy,
And
and it's not gonna be. But like at first, then that's why I said like that's to me was the Flanderization was it was a guy that didn't that was his way or the highway, didn't give a damn, lived his life to the fullest, and then towards the end it was like, okay, I'm crazy but want to live normal.
But then he's also asked to tone down his craziness when he's trying to date his girlfriend
Yeah.
at the start. Like he didn't just never sense that he was crazy. I
And
don't
he
know.
acknowledges it too though.
that's another
But you have
reason
to have
why.
another
Oh, go on.
character say it. That you have to have another character say that he needs to tone it down, and he still kind of acts weird in front of her. So I don't know.
That's the other reason I put those bonus episodes in for my comedy show, and also my 5 steps, was because in my 5 steps or my 5 stages, I forget what it's called. He builds a sandcastle in the parking lot of the hospital, which is just it's Simpsons level buffoonery. Uh, and then in season 8, there's an episode where he sees Carla plucking a chest hair when she thinks she's alone in the break room, and then through the rest of the episode, she gaslights him into thinking that in fact did not happen, and it causes him to have this crisis where he's talking to himself about all these different things he's done, some of which happened before our eyes. And I think one of the things he says verbatim is, did I really build a sandcastle in the hospital parking lot? That doesn't sound real, or something to that effect. And it makes you realize as they're winding down, they're getting a little more self aware, a little more cheeky with it, and then just realizing that, oh yeah, that absolutely did happen, but it's worth considering that maybe it didn't, and it's all in your head, you fucking lunatic. Yeah, I apologize for getting so heady so early on, but I wanted to see what this would look like. And this doesn't mean that we won't talk about other Scrubs characters in the future, because I really think, like we're talking about, all of them are fit for their individual episode, not unlike them all getting their individual episodes within the series of Scrubs itself. Which brings me to a new segment that I'm going to do for this one. Based on the titles, I really think we can have a title based game somehow, because so many sitcoms have great naming structures, and Scrubs is no exception to that. So every episode, with the exception of the ones focusing on non-JD characters, they all start with my. It's going to be my blank, whether it's my self-examination, my all the episodes we've talked about today. You don't need more examples. Based on the experience you've had today, and you were to give this an episode title, what would it be? And I'm not even opposed to saying best one wins, as long as it doesn't hurt me too deeply.
Okay. So about our experience on this conversation.
Yeah, what would you think of this episode if you were to give it a my blank? Oh, bonus points, and I know this is fully extemporaneous, but I hate that I could probably do it. Bonus points if you give it an Zach Braff style voiceover wrap up. You know, it's easy to talk a lot about names in a place like this. Sometimes it's how we look at you, and sometimes it's what we put on your toe so that your family can find you tomorrow morning. It's usually not that dark, but you get it.
I guess everyone wants to feel like they belong in the world and have their own character. And I guess, after a while, yeah, we're all crazy in our own different ways, but it's the people that love us and are actually there that stick through that those are the ones that matter and those are the ones that we fight for. But if they don't agree with you, then they don't. But I guess that's my cleanup.
My episode would be um my unanticipated understanding. Um and outro. Um you know, one of the main things that keeps the hospital running are conversations. Conversations between doctors and nurses, conversations between patients and their families. And you never know, the right conversation at the right time can glean rewards that you would never ever find. And I guess that's my unexpected or unanticipated understanding, whatever I called it.
Sometimes as an outsider, you're always thrown into some sort of crash course situation, like being told that you needed to complete this surgery within a matter of 72 hours, as ones do. But sometimes you have to face those challenges, and it doesn't always work out as the way you planned it to, which is okay. That's life. Being an outsider and all. It's like having a vote on the general board of not really knowing what's going to happen unless you research and learn from it, which is why my vote will be abstained.
I gotta take a crack at it though. Now that the rules have actually been established, I like this. Around here, there's a lot of little mistakes. Some are friendly, some can be fatal. But when you get the right group of people, all criticism feels constructive, and even the most cordial infractions don't feel so bad, even when they tell you that you also have dyslexia as part of this cordial infraction. And so that's why I would call it my or cardial infarction. So I do think it's only fair, as we're starting to wrap up here, that we do take a final head count on the janitor, whether we say definitively Flanderized, not Flanderized. I will, again, alphabetically by first name, I will start off with Ben, and I will give my final vote at the end.
Despite very good reasons as to why you would say he was not, I think I will still hold that he was Flanderized overall, but he was Flanderized less than the characters around him. I think he still had a lot of it, like, there was still a ramp up in his character. We still see that he gets a little crazier. And even though we're used to it, I think that it still shows that he never really had any sort of like gag apart from being that. So for me, I still see it. So that is my vote. But I appreciate this rug that is now no longer in my house. You pulled it and took it.
It's mine.
So many rugs have been pulled from my house as well. I'm not sure who took them, but I'm too scared to go out to my living room and check at the moment. I'm kind of thinking of the overall what ifs of this show, seeing the 10 episodes I did watch, including the pilot. I think of the what ifs of the janitor if he were to be basically stationary the whole time. And he kind of does go back to Sacred Heart, but then without his marriage or without the character growth of him getting fired at season 8, it makes me wonder if they were really trying to humanize him more than other characters, because when he did get fired, and I think it was season 8 episode 3, he kind of found himself to be a little bit lost trying to find himself, and it probably would have been nice to see that growth, or at least what happened to him after the fact. But at least there was a change there, and maybe there was some sort of progression in him, rather than him sticking down to one character trait of being the psychopath, being the sociopath that he is. He could have just been that the entire time. But I do think that there are challenges that he does face along the way that have really genuine ending moments. And there are times where they, for a lack of a better term, pull the rug underneath him and try to put him back in his place. But then later on, I think that there are actual genuine endings that don't do that for him. And there's not necessarily one common trait that he falls under, more than he's exploring different options. And I do think that it worked out with the solutions we were given at the end of the arc. So I will say he's not Flanderized.
Okay. Tyler?
Okay, wow, you guys, you're making this one hard on me. Beginning, I was gonna say not Flanderized, and then Ben said Flanderized, and I was like, oh, okay, Flanderized, and then Dakota says not Flanderized, and I'm like, oh shoot, well maybe not. It really depends on how you
Damn,
look
I
at
wish
it.
we could have talked about that for the last hour and a half to help inform that final decision you might make.
And maybe it's me. Maybe I'm still struggling with what is the ideal of Flanderization. You know what I mean? And what Flanderization means to all of us. From what I've seen, what I've gathered, just from the beginning of the interactions with the janitor, yeah, he was psychotic and crazy, but he was very choreographed. You know what I mean? He was very precise in I think it really falls down to the demeanor. So when it comes to his actions and how he did it for his own entertainment to mess with others, but it was only purely for him, right? It was to make him kind of happy and some kind of fulfillment. And I think so I think he was psychotic from the beginning because of that, like chess. He was constantly playing chess at that whole with the whole entire crew. Everyone was his own little pawn in his own little games that he was playing. And it was his own little fun entertainment that he was enjoying. I'm not saying that he wasn't crazy from the beginning. It tells you from the beginning he is. I think with the social awareness of the show, though, and as it continues to progress, and I love how you threw the world itself was just wild because it is. Nothing like this happens in any real world. So I think because as the world is also just its own crazy bubble, and he was crazy from the beginning. I guess I have to say, no, he's not Flanderized. However, the writing does him dirty because he no longer becomes this psycho. He no longer becomes like a psychopath as a clever, smart psychopath that he was in the beginning, and in the end, he becomes loose and a weak psychopath that it's the butt of the joke of I'm just crazy so I have to do crazy things. And that's where I want to say he is Flanderized because he, you know what I mean? Like he's no longer doing it for his own entertainment. He's just doing it because he has to do it. Because there's no one else to do it. So he is the crazy character. He's fallen into the pit where you have to expect the janitor to do something crazy to keep the show going to give that relief between plot A and plot B. It's like written in sand that he always has to have these little sub character plots that messes around with the story and everything. And I think that's where the Flanderization comes into. He no longer does it only just for his own pure benefit, but he does it because like he has to. It's written and like you know what I mean? Like it almost like he is written to have something go on every episode.
So final answer.
Yes, he is Flanderized.
Okay.
Loosely, in a poorly written way. I don't know how to explain it.
Okay.
Hopefully it makes sense.
I appreciate you talking about him being crazy from the pilot because I was trying to figure out how best to frame my closing argument because I hadn't thought that far ahead. But I think if we talk about the pilot and then we jump all the way to season 8, episode 18 or 19, since it is part 2 of my finale, JD has his goodbye with the janitor where he learns his allegedly real name of Glenn Matthews. And as they're finally patching things up after all these years of cruel treatment towards JD, it's established that it really is, in fact, all over this penny in the door from the pilot. It was, at the time, nothing more than a throwaway line, but by season 8, it had been mythologized so much outside of the show that it was a nice little callback, and it turns out JD, in fact, did leave the penny in the door. And the janitor knew that and just wanted some sort of admittance, some sort of apology. But instead, JD denied it and walked away. And janitor decided at that moment that the next 8 years of that kid's life were going to be hell. Now, he established all that. He says that in the finale. And in some shows, a moment like that feels like such a retcon to everything that you've seen prior, where it's like, we didn't need to know exactly what happened for this whole thing to take place. This feels overwritten. It doesn't make sense. It feels tacked on. But because of that one throwaway line in the pilot and the immediate action we see with JD and the janitor past that point, it is nothing but fully believable that this is the exact same fucking guy from day 1 to day 1000. And he is just consistently vengeful in the exact same manner all over that. I was going to say cardiac infarction again, and I couldn't do it because I still don't know what it means. But over that one misgiving, over that one penny in the door, that fuels his rage for 8 years. And when he reveals it, it feels organic. Therefore, I am saying it's consistent characterization. I am voting not Flanderized. which means this episode lands with a 50-50 Flanders stamp.
Yeah, I'm just glad because I was really worried because I really wanted Tyler to be like, Tyler, no likey. And so I'm just glad that he was agreed with me.
Again, like, and it's really, to me, it's 50-50. It's hard to give a choice because, again, he is the same throughout the whole series, but how he's written to deliver those jokes and everything, that's where I feel like the Flanderization falls into. It's not on him as the character, it's the writing of how his jokes and who he is as a character is delivered.
Right, I gotcha.
I like it.
Mhm.
Well, if I may take over
Oh,
for
please.
a moment,
I was just going to throw to you.
as we move into next week, I'll be taking the reins again,
Mhm.
and I'm really glad that I get to take the reins again, mostly because I feel like I didn't really know what to do since I was very nicely handed over episode 1 to do. And I had no idea what I was doing. So now that I've seen everything you guys have all done, it gives me has given me a lot more of an idea of what I should be doing. So I am excited. This character is going to be a relatively big turn away from the janitor, where the janitor is a vengeful, insane. He has a lot going on in his head, it seems. He's vengeful and he's got a lot going on. To somebody who is kind of seen, I don't know, maybe I'm putting myself too much on here, but America's sweetheart. Because he's pretty nice and he doesn't have a super crazy bone in his body. We're going to go to one of America's most beloved shows while we dive into Kevin Malone from The Office.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right.
So get yourself, you know what? I'm making chili.
Get yourself a bowl of chili, boys.
A chili or a pot of chili.
I'm excited for your introduction next week where there's like 9 words in the intro.
9 years in April, and I'm covered in chili.
Next week's game is everyone's got to bring their best chili recipe.
Okay, straight up, I had to miss this yesterday and I'm really bummed about it. A friend of mine here in town invited me to a soup party and I was unspeakably sad to have to miss it for a work thing, but even more sad because I was going to talk up this dessert soup I was bringing and just keep bringing it up over and over and then show up with a giant serving bowl of butterscotch pudding. And like, it was so funny in my head. And like, on one hand, like, I'm bummed I didn't get to do it. On the other hand, I don't think I have a mixer in this way. Like, I would have had to make pudding. I would have had to let it cool. Like, there would have been a whole process, and I would have had to laugh to myself as I'm doing it. Like, they're gonna love this one, and they probably would have. But it's sad.
My dessert pudding.
You can still make it for yourself.
That should be the title of the episode. My dessert pudding.
My just desserts.
Or my dessert soup.
My just desserts. That's it.
My just dessert.
Damn,
Nuts.
I'm just that good. All right, well, let's see who else is on my wave right now, because it's time to close this out. Before we do that, once again, thanks so much to Sally for all the work he does here in post. Thanks so much for you guys watching, listening, however you're getting this podcast under the sun. Feel free to like, subscribe, leave a comment here on YouTube, subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts, and do check out the Patreon feed. I don't know if we're actually allowed to link it here, but it is going to be under Flanderization files. We'll link it wherever we are legally allowed to do so. Follow along, watch at home, suggest more stuff you want to see us do, and interact with everything we got going on there. So without further ado, we're going to play a round of Mind Meld, get back on the same page, and get the hell out of here. Let's do it.
Right on it.
All right, Ben. 1, 2, 3. Crab leg.
Drywall.
Crab
What'd you say?
leg.
Crab leg and drywall. 1,
2,
2,
3. Red Lobster.
Biscuits. I see that's. I was thinking Red Lobster biscuits, brother. Dry as
I was
fuck.
thinking you used
Go
to
ahead.
work there, and I thought they did you dirty, so I was just going to kind
Yeah.
of crap on the food as a whole.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. So Red Lobster
All right,
and biscuits.
I'm abstaining.
Three.
1,
3,
2, 1.
Restaurant.
What'd you say?
Butter.
Restaurant.
If not Red Lobster, I have to give away.
I don't know.
3, 2, 1. Texas Roadhouse.
Olive Garden.
I was thinking Olive
I
Garden.
was thinking Texas Roadhouse with the cinnamon butter.
Okay, a Texas Roadhouse and an Olive Garden. What's the best thing they're gonna find both at? Especially late at
Gotcha.
night.
2,
1,
3,
2,
MILFs.
3. Applebee's.
Oh, okay.
What'd you say?
MILFs.
Okay, what is the combination of MILFs and Applebee's?
This seems obvious.
3, 2,
2, 1.
1. Teachers.
Happy hour.
Hooters.
Oh, smart.
Okay.
Does anybody happen to have a really good knowledge of the inner workings of Hooters happy hours? Do we know what deals are offered?
Dakota pulls out 6 different to-go menus, even though he only dines in.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. You said Hooters and happy hours?
Don't say it that way. One of us is supposed to raise our hands.
We've talked about MILFs.
I know. I
Hooters,
talked about MILFs.
happy
That's why I'm
hour.
keeping my hand down. I'm in timeout right now.
Come on. You know what MILFs drink at happy hour at Hooters.
Okay, I don't, and I'm so glad, actually.
I don't want to answer. If you say milk.
I don't think I've ever been to a Hooters.
Come on. What do MILFs drink at Hooters at happy hour?
I don't know.
1, 2, 3. Bahama
Margaritas.
Mama.
Okay.
I was going to say mimosas.
3, 2, 1. Cocktails.
Cocktails.
Thank you. All right, that's our show. Thank you guys so much for watching. We've been the same guys. Next week, hopefully, we'll be the same guys. Have a great day.